unlocking the money vault, how to escape the cage that's keeping you imprisoned, which could be a 9 to 5 job, job, or just over broke, as I like to call a job, or it could be a business that you're involved in that is whether it's brick and mortar or whether it's online or e-commerce or whatever it might be. It might not just may not be doing it for you. Now, the concept that this particular training is going to be following is asking you one question and one question only, and that is this: what is holding you back from your first $1 million year? What is holding you back from your first $1 million year? Now, the emphasis is on the you, because that's exactly what's holding you back is you. You, for some reason, have a brick wall that's in between you and that $1 million, right? And the $1 million is an arbitrary figure, because for some ungodly reason unknown to me, people seem to think that $1 million is like the holy grail, right? It's that mythical beast, that unicorn that's way out there in front of you, that is there, you know, that's the promised land. That's the holy land, is that $1 million, right? But the reality is that it's an arbitrary figure. I could have picked anything, but I picked that because the majority of the people that's listening to this particular training, that's a unicorn for them. That's where they want to go. So the concepts that I'm going to be discussing over these series of trainings in regards to this premise, this question, is what's holding you back from your first $1 million year. Now, what I'm going to be sharing with you is not some pie in the sky, pulled it out of my backside theory that has never been tested in the field, right? What I'm going to share with you, these principles have been applied in the trenches across multiple businesses, not only that I own, but that I have learned from mentors who have more than enough past this $1 million milestone many times. I've passed it many times myself across multiple businesses in different industries, from financial services to bricks and mortar to restaurants to e-commerce, you name it. We've passed this milestone a number of times, and what I'm sharing with you is tested in the trenches, applied to my own businesses, and the learnings that I've experienced in 50 odd years on this planet. When I record this, 50 odd years on this planet, things that I've learned from testing myself in the trenches, things that I've learned from mentors of mine that I've invested to be learn the intricacies of businesses that they've applied their principles in the trenches, right? So this is no pie in the sky crapola. This is stuff that is guaranteed to get you on the way to your first $1 million year. Okay. So, and just so that you are fully aware, I've got a couple of apprentices or people that are on their own journeys to their first $1 million year that are here with me today, that are going to help you on your journey, because what they're going to do is they're going to ask me questions if they get stuck on something as I share these principles. And so hopefully this training will be able to help them move to the next step in their journey to their first $1 million in a year. But the first thing is the first thing that we need to discuss, or we need to get a definition for, so to speak, is this. What is $1 million? So what is $1 million then? Okay. So, how about I bring in my my guinea pigs? So I'll ask Melinda. Melinda, what is your, just off the top of your head? And they have not been prepared for this. They don't even know what's in this particular training or presentation. They have no idea. In your understanding, as it is today, right now, what is $1 million then?
$1 million.
Yeah.
It's a figure that everybody tries to obtain, but the bigger point isn't just money. It's the feelings, it's the freedom, it's the emotions of your life when you're financially free.
Awesome. That's a really good definition of what $1 million is. So it's not just monetary, it's the things that, the feelings that it attains in relation to having $1 million on hand or in the bank. Okay, Eric. Thank you, Melinda. Appreciate that. Eric,
Yes.
what's your definition of $1 million?
So if we divide it by 365, that gives us $2,740 a day, and that's not that much if we find a way to make that work for us. So it's much easier thinking this way if we want to make it $1 million.
Yep, there's the old saying that break it down to the ridiculous that they have in sales. Tom Hopkins used to use that, break it to the ridiculous. But yeah, because $1 million, like you said, is it's this mythical creature, the unicorn out there. And if you look at it from the perspective of having never attained it, because that's the reality, in the mind that you have today, $1 million, you've never attained it. So you don't know what it's like to have $1 million. So, but you do know what it's like, as Eric shared, to have, say $3,000, right? Maybe not have been made in a day, but you do know what it's like to have $3,000 or have made $3,000. So that's real to you, where $1 million might not be real. So for me, and the concept that I want to share in regards to what is $1 million is this. There's basically, and this is key number one of the three that I'm going to share on this training. And that's in regards to what is $1 million. And there's basically a what I like to call the Trinity Vault, right? So there's a reason it's called the Trinity Vault, because there's 3 levels to the Trinity Vault, right? And the first level, or the first Trinity Vault, is in regards to $1 million is gross revenue in a year. So that the question is, what's holding you back from achieving $1 million in a year, right? And for some people, it'll be the understanding, which I'm sharing right now, the difference between what actually $1 million is, and which of these 3 Trinity Vaults is the first one that you need to attain, or the first one, or the first target that you are looking to attain, right? So the definition 1 of what is $1 million is $1 million gross revenue in a year, right? Now that, more than anything else, is the most likely for you to attain first, right? You're most likely to hit $1 million revenue gross before hitting any of the other 2 Trinity Vaults, right? So what is gross revenue, right? Well, gross revenue is money. So imagine you go into a shop, right? And as we can see in this particular, so we've got old Scrooge McDuck there counting his money, keeping an evil eye on his pile of coins, right? And so imagine you walked into a store and you know, let's say it's a coffee shop, and you went and bought a coffee, right? And you hand over the $5 or $7, depending on where you go, for your coffee, of what size it is. You hand over your money. That is then put into the till, right, into the cash register, and that is what we would classify as revenue to the coffee shop, right? So $1 million in gross revenue is, imagine that cash register having $1 million just flow through it, right? That's gross revenue, right? So they've had $1 million just flow through it. So as an example from my own life, one of our businesses that we own is a cafe/restaurant, right? Which we took over. It was a rundown, beat up old coffee shop at the time. And then we applied some of the principles that I'm going to be sharing with you across this training. And one of the first principles that we were looking to get was this one that's here, the gross revenue. Now, the revenue that it was currently attaining was less than 300,000 gross revenue per year, right? So applying some of the principles that you're going to learn, we got that revenue within the space of the first year to $1.3 million gross revenue in a year. Okay. Now, gross revenue does not take into account any expenses. All right, so it doesn't take into account staff. It doesn't take into account any costs that you've got going out for product or anything like that. It doesn't take into account taxes. Doesn't take into account anything. All it takes into account is that you've had $1 million pass through the cash register in 365 days, right? So in the example that Eric gave, $2,740 a day, that is what is required, $2,740 a day to hit $1 million over 365 days, right? And that is gross revenue, that number, right? Doesn't have any taxes taken out, doesn't have any staff that you're paying, it doesn't have any of that, right? So the first definition of $1 million is gross revenue. Now here's the horrific realization that some of you might be thinking, oh, $1 million gross revenue, that's awesome, right? It's not. Just because you have $1 million roll through the till or cash register does not necessarily mean that you made any money, that you made any profit at all. Okay, just because you turned over $1 million, right? So I'll give you an example. There's two examples I'm going to give you. You might have heard of them. Let me know if you've heard of these two companies. One is Amazon. Have you heard of Amazon? Now, they had millions and millions and millions of dollars, and then into the billions of dollars of gross revenue, but they never made a cent, right? In fact, their net was negative. They spent more than they earned, right? So there'd be a lot of households out there that have gross revenue that comes in, but they spend more than they earn, right? Which is part of the problem of why people can't become wealthy. When you spend more than you earn, you have no chance of becoming wealthy, zero, right? So just because you've had $1 million pass through the cash register doesn't necessarily mean you actually get to keep any of it, right? So I've mentioned Amazon, and one that has just floated recently on the stock exchange, you might have heard of, you might have actually used them. It's called Uber, right? Uber has a massive gross revenue. They also have a massive negative balance sheet because they spend way more money than they earn, right? Way more money than they earn. So in the importance of things, this number one of the Trinity Vaults is not the most important at all, but it's the most likely one that you're going to hit first, right? Gross revenue. Okay. The next one is definition 2 of $1 million, and that is $1 million net revenue in a year, right? $1 million net revenue in a year is definition of Trinity Vault number 2. That's the one that's you want to get to quickly, and that's the one that includes, after you've spent for staff, operating costs, as you can see in this particular picture here, how much of Robinhood's money went to operating expenses and overhead, and how much actually went to the poor, right? So net revenue is after you've taken out all expenses, all operating costs, all taxes. You have $1 million left. Okay, so you might have a gross revenue with 10 million a year and a net revenue of $1 million. Okay, so that's net revenue takes into account all the operating expenses, right? Everything that you use or pay out in costs to run your business or to generate that $1 million net revenue. So that's, after gross revenue, is probably the next one you're going to hit, most likely, when it comes to achieving that unicorn level $1 million income, so to speak, right? So we've talked about gross revenue, which you can still actually not make any money. And then we've talked about net revenue, which is after all expenses, you have $1 million left. And then we have the third of the Trinity Vaults, which is this. Definition 3. $1 million cash on hand or in the bank vault. As you can see here, old Mr. McDuck, you have the ability to swim in your money, right? So you have $1 million net cash on hand that you can literally count, or it's in the bank, or you can go to your bank account and you can see it, $1 million there sitting in the bank, right? So that's the 3 levels of the Trinity Vault. That's probably the one that comes third, right? You generally pass through the gross revenue, then you go to the net revenue, and then you have $1 million sitting in the bank. Okay. So that's the 3 Trinity Vaults, because it's important to understand what $1 million is, right? And which one of the 3 Trinity Vaults you're looking to obtain in the end, right? So do we have any questions from the audience in regards to the 3? Any questions about them? Any clarity that you'd like around the 3 different definitions of what $1 million is? So we've got nothing from Eric. Melinda, anything that you are unclear of in regards to $1 million?
No.
No, that didn't sound very certain.
No. With 2 and 3, the difference between net revenue, wouldn't that also
Yep.
be $1 million?
Not necessarily, because you might have net revenue come through. So you've had $1 million come through the business, but that's not necessarily the same as having $1 million sitting in your bank account,
Okay.
right? So you've earned $1 million net, but you may have then taken some of that $1 million that you earn net from your business, and then you went and bought some property with it, or then you went on a few holidays, and so you have, 500,000 sitting in the bank, or 300,000, or $20 or whatever it might be. You took $1 million net out of the business, but it's not still sitting there in the bank, right?
All right.
So does that make sense now?
Yes.
Yes, right. So you may, given your love of cruises, have decided that you were going to cruise for 365 days. And so you took your net revenue and you spent, well, I don't know how much it would cost, 250,000 or whatever it was on that. So you only have X number of amounts sitting in the bank. Okay. So that means clear, crystal. Awesome. Okay, so now we have those three distinctions about the three Trinity volts of what are the definitions of $1 million. We now move on to key number 2. And if you have got a pen and paper, I would absolutely highly recommend that you start taking notes about what I'm about to share with you, because this, my friends, will blow your mind. Okay, so if that's not what we call a pre-frame, nothing is. Here we go. Right. So my attendees in the peanut gallery, if you make $1 million, are you rich? So I will go to Eric first. If you make $1 million, and I'm gonna classify, just to make it easy, I'm gonna classify the definition of being rich of meaning financially. Okay, so, and we'll use the third one just to make it a little bit harder, right? So you have $1 million sitting in the bank. Are you rich? Financially rich. No, I'm not talking about anything else, just financially rich in regards to where you're currently sitting to where you would be sitting if you had $1 million in the bank, right? So if you make $1 million and it's sitting in your bank account right now, are you rich?
No, not really. It's not going to last long if you want to retire on it.
Okay, so that's an interesting one. Okay, so you're not rich. Okay, so we'll leave it there with you, right? Okay, Melinda. So here's the same question to you. If you make $1 million cash in the bank, okay, so it's cash on hand, are you rich?
You have to make sure all your bills are already paid off. All your debts.
Let's
Get to that.
imagine. Okay, so let's imagine that everything else is paid off. You have no debt, zero. You just have $1 million sitting in the bank. Are you rich?
It's a mindset. You have to believe.
No, forget about mindset and all that kind of stuff. Just in the power of financial meaning, are you rich? And rich is rich is different to everyone, like Eric has just said. But because if you've got 10 million sitting in the bank, 20 million sitting in the bank, some people might still not feel rich. Some people might have $1 billion. Some people have $1 billion sitting in the bank and don't feel rich. But just in the scope of what we're talking about, what is holding us back from our first $1 million year? If we have $1 million sitting in the bank account, would you say you're rich?
My circumstances, yes.
Okay, awesome. So we have conflicting opinions here of a few. So Eric, on the left hand, says he wouldn't be rich. Okay, so Eric, here's a question for you. What number would make you feel rich if you had it sitting in the bank account? All bills are paid, just financially. We're not talking about mentally, mindset, or anything else. What number, just ballpark it, in the bank right now, make you feel rich?
If I don't have to work,
No.
100 million.
100 million. Okay, so 100 million would make you feel rich. And because there's a bit of an age gap, not much, but there's an age gap between Melinda and Eric, and we won't say how old they are because they are both young. Right, so Melinda would feel wealthy, or rich, I should say, with $1 million, and Eric would feel rich with $100 million, right? Which would definitely take a lot longer to obtain, right? Yes, I am very tactful. Right. So the question: if you have $1 million, so whoever's listening to this right now, if you have $1 million, would that make you feel rich? All your bills are paid, everything. You just have $1 million sitting in your bank account. All right. Okay. So, would you feel rich? Here's my take on it. Okay, so you have $1 million sitting in the bank account. If you made $25,000 a year for 40 years, you've made $1 million over your lifetime. Are you rich? So Melinda is wise in years. Eric's not so wise in years. I'm wiser than Eric in years. But the reality is that every single person that's listening to this right now will make $1 million over their lifetime, right? So if you make if you earn $25,000 a year, and let's imagine that that's cash and that you can put in the bank, for 40 years, you've made $1 million over your lifetime. But are you rich though? And my definition is that you are not. You are not rich. Because what if you made that same million in 1 year? Are you rich now in comparison to making it over 40 years? All right. So it's the same amount of money. So money is not the difference. By my definition, if you made it over 40 years, you're not rich. But if you make it within 1 year, you are rich from a financial perspective, right? Because the likelihood of Eric making $100 million in 1 year, not very likely, unless he won the lottery, right? Which takes no skill, and it would have to have $100 million in it. But anyway, we're just saying we've utilized our skills to make our million. So we have the definition of not rich being 40 years, you still have $1 million, which is the in the equation is the stable number, $1 million. But if we make that $1 million in a year, we are rich, aren't we? Because the amount of money is the same. All we did was we compressed time. So you made the same amount of money, but in a shorter period of time. Right? So we've made the money component is exactly the same, but we've compressed from 40 years to 1, the making of that money. So what we've done is we've compressed time. Compressed time, and I say that with emphasis because of the fact that it's super important to understand that concept of time compression, right? Because here's the reality, my friends. Your whole life, you've been lied to. You've been duped that getting rich quick was a scheme, right? Getting rich quick was a scam, right? And do we even have a name for it? The get rich quick scam, right? Get rich quick scam. Go onto Google and Google get rich quick, and it's the major likelihood that you will get is the fact that getting rich quick is a scam, right? But the reality is this. What about the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme, which was option 1? The stay broke for the rest of your life scheme. I mean, what did they tell you at school? Go to school, get good grades, work, go to uni, get a job. Now, what was it we talked about that I highly emphasized? Time compression. Okay. Now, the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme is what you've been duped into being called a job, right? how do I put this? You will be broke for the rest of your life. That's a classic, right? But that's the thing, right? You've been duped that getting rich quick is wrong, but staying broke for the rest of your life is right. It's the right thing to do, right? But what I'm talking to you about, and the thing that's holding you back from your first $1 million a year is the fact that you've been duped by the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme, and you've been told that getting rich quick is a scam, and you don't understand it's all about time compression, the ability to compress time. Because this, right? I talked about time compression. If you make $1 million in a month, time compression, the amount of money stays the same, remember? All we've done is compress time. You are 12 times wealthier or richer, we're using the word richer, than the person who makes $1 million a year. But the principles that I'm talking about throughout the series of trainings apply regardless of the amount of money or the time. The thing that's the important thing is to compress the time in which you apply the principles. So if we take, and we're talking about what's holding you back from $1 million a year, one, it's the time compression, right? You don't understand about compressing time and the importance of compressing time, because the information that you've been fed your entire life is that the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme is the one that you should follow, right? But what I'm suggesting you do is you follow the concept of getting rich quick and compressing the time to make the $1 million, as opposed to 40 years. Why not do it in a year? And while we're at it, let's talk about something crazy and go, well, why do it in a year if you can do it in a month? Because you're 12 times richer than you would be if you made it in the year. But it's all in relation to the concept of time compression. Your ability to compress time gives you what Melinda talked about, freedom. I mean, if you compress time and you went from 40 years in having the million to having it in a year, and let's just say for some ridiculous reason that was the end of it, right? That was the end of the game. It was just getting to $1 million, and then that was it, right? So the $1 million was the goal, right? So we've done it in 40 years because we've followed the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme, right? But you've just learned about time compression and you're super excited. So you apply the principles and bang, you get the $1 million in a year, right? So guess what you just did? Aside from compressing time, you now have 39 years worth of freedom, right? But let's just think we went real crazy, like super crazy, right? And we gain $1 million. And instead of us doing it in a year, we did it in a month. All right. So now we have almost 40 years. So we've done exactly the same thing that took us 40 years, and we've done it in 30 days. All we've done, same goal, just compressed time. So let that sink in. I mean, because it's the most powerful concept that you ever want to learn is the ability to compress time, all right? Because the money is not the goal, right? The money is not the goal. You should focus on creating wealth through the time compression principle instead of creating wealth through money. So my question to you is, I want you to ask yourself, how can you compress time? How can you compress time? What things can you do to compress 40 years into a year? What, because the money, imagine the goal stays the same. Just how can you compress the time, right? So now we go to our panel of experts, and I will go to, who did I go to? I'll go to Melinda again. Right? I think I went to Melinda first last time. So Melinda, anything that you would anything in relation to the concept that I just shared there, like I said, get your pens and paper out because it's a mind-blowing concept that you can apply in regards to the compression of time. Is there any questions that you want to ask?
I want to know how to do it.
I knew that was coming. How, well, before I answer that question, which I'm not going to do right now, right? So I will leave that to the next training, but I want you to ask yourself that same question, because with what you need to do to compress time is expand the 6 inches between your ears, right?
Yeah.
The 6 inches between your ears, right? Same thinking gets same results. And unfortunately, like I said, you've been fed the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme for all your life, right? And you've just heard about this compression of time principle. So it's going to take, you know, rewiring of the neural network between your ears there. So what I want you to do, Melinda, is an exercise for you for 50 minutes, right? Is just, how can I compress time? Top of a sheet of A4 paper, 50-minute timer, and just write down anything that comes to your mind in regards to how can I compress time, right? And anyone who's listening who wants to do the same exercise, just 50 minutes. How can I compress time? Because it's not about the money, it's about the time. How can I compress time? What kind of things could bring me the ability to be able to compress time? Now, I could tell you right now, but that won't help, right? I want you to get those cogs between your ears turning, and because that actually helps me a lot, right? Because I definitely feed off what you give, because that, for some unbeknownst reason to me, and you know, before we started this training, there was things that I was talking to you guys about. You said something, and it gave me a thread that I could then share with you, right? So that's why it's important for you, one, to be able to get those cogs moving between the ears in regards to time compression, but it also gets stuff down on paper that then I can work with, right? I could give you the ideas, but that's based on my experience alone, where if you come up with the ideas, then I can apply what I know, and then we have a whole new idea, right? So it's like the meeting of two or more minds coming together creates a third and greater mind, which Napoleon talks about in the mastermind concept. So that's what I want you to do, Melinda. What about you, Eric? Do you have any? I know you said you like the concept of of time compression.
I'm already writing a few different things.
Beautiful.
It's top of my head.
Yeah.
You want me to share them? Okay, so
You don't have to, but if you want to share them, again, it might be good for the people that are listening. What are some of the things that went? Because obviously you were writing furiously, as I heard, as we were talking about the concept of time compression. So what are some things that you want to share with the people listening that might be of assistance to them, and Melinda, for that matter?
Well, first of all, someone have to become an entrepreneur and work for yourself and have the business that pays while the person sleeps, not just
Okay,
when
so
you work.
I'll just stop you there for a second, right? So let's go back to the first one. Because there was a whole lot in that I'd like to unpack. So the first thing was entrepreneur, right? Become an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
Is that, yep. So become an entrepreneur. Now that in and of itself, right, is the diametrically opposed opposite way of thinking than the stay broke for the rest of your life scheme, right? So, right, and especially if you're looking to make $100 million, right, the reality is that pretty much, aside from winning the lottery, is the only way that you're going to get $100 million is to become an entrepreneur and then take a company either public or have it bought by another company for $100 million, right?
Mhm.
So that's time compression, right? That's an aspect of time compression, is the entrepreneur has the biggest opportunity to be able to compress time, right?
Right.
Especially for $1 million, right? There is no reason why within the space of a year that an entrepreneur can't go through the Trinity Vault, right? There's no reason. Okay, so become an entrepreneur is one thing that Eric shared in regards to
Mhm.
compressing time. What next thing? What was the next thing?
It would be if somebody has some expertise, certain model, a business they do, just duplicate yourself and have others to do your task, or do
Ah,
exactly what you do, and which is like there's a lot of businesses that have the same model. But you will
o-
have somebody doing your stuff, and you just like multiply, multiply, multiply. There will be another way.
awesome. Okay, so a time compression model that you just shared there, which is, where you use the words multiply, 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 was a time compression model that the network marketing industry use is that exact concept. Is
Mhm.
they where you have other people, regardless of what do you think about network marketing, right? When that's not what we're here to do. We're here to talk about ways to compress time. And that is a way to compress time, right? Because you're using other people's effort, right? Other people's effort, right? And that's a concept of time compression, using other people's efforts. And another thing what Eric just said there was in regards to getting other people to do the work. That's another time compression effect, is having other people do the work and duplicate the task so that it's the who, not the how, right? So instead of you learning how to do something, you find someone who already knows how to do what it is that you want to do, and you pay them to do it. That's an aspect of time compression, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Right. Okay. So I don't want to give too many of these things away, but Melinda is running furiously, I'm quite sure. So what was the next thing? An aspect?
Yeah, another one would be partnering up with some other a leader in the industry, and introduce them a different niche and be in charge
Okay.
of the niche. And so let's say if they manufacture, and I don't know, let's say they make cars, for example, and
Yes.
introduce them, since you have all the equipment, and let's say you're not using 24/7, for example,
Yep.
or maybe you have a facility that can be expanded, and you can produce, since you have staff, or knowledge, and create a different product for the niche, and be in charge of that niche, and partner up that way, with that manufacturer.
Absolutely. That's another way of doing it. There's other ways of compressing time as well. The one that I would like to highlight, a massive time compression principle, is that Eric shared, because he talked about car manufacturers, right? Because do you remember Henry Ford, right? What was a concept that he introduced that he didn't invent, but got it from somewhere else, which is the exact concept that Eric is talking about, and that is the assembly line, right? So he took the concept of, because they were hand making cars, right? And then when you have a production line, which is a process that the car moves along, and it's just that you went from being able to make one car a day to hundreds of thousands of cars a day. That's a concept of time compression, right? So all they did was they created a process that allowed them to compress time, right? So, and the ability to make money while you sleep, I think, was another one, wasn't it? So how can you have the ability to make money while you sleep is another asset or concept that would require time, or that would be an aspect that you would use if you had time compression, right?
Mhm.
Thank you, Eric. Much appreciated. But I still want you to continue thinking on these things in regards to how can you compress the acquisition of $1 million or whatever it is. How can you apply time compression in your personal situation? Okay. Melinda's furiously writing. Did you get any ideas there, Melinda? Did anything spring to mind?
Repurposing something like using your
Yeah.
podcast and then writing it as a newsletter, then writing it as an ad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the time compression. That's an aspect of time compression as well. Absolutely. Is the repurposing of something. And Eric talked about how can you take a particular process from one industry and apply it in a different industry, right? That's a time compression technique as well, right? So Melinda's just shared one there. How can you do something once and use it many, many times? And this was a concept we talked about before the call, right? Didn't we, Melinda?
Yeah.
We talked about a time compression technique before the call. Okay, so that is a key building block, key principle in regards to what is holding you back from your first $1 million year, and that is understanding and applying time compression. Okay, so third key, and just so that you know, I can't remember whether I mentioned it. These principles are in no particular order. They're not from the most important to the least important. They are just where they are in the presentation, right? So one is more important than, whatever, depending on where you are in your journey, these will have their own individual order of importance. They are all principles that you should be applying to your whatever is holding you back from your first $1 million year, right? And if you already have attained $1 million or $10 million or $100 million, the principles remain the same, right? You just got a new target. That's all. The principles don't change, right? Principles don't change. Okay, so here's number three. Key number three. And you've got to understand this. You have got to understand this principle, this concept. You've got to. Life is not fair. All right? Life is not fair. I don't care how good you are, how nice you've been, how much you go to church, and I'm not saying anything against religion, but how many times you pray to God a day, how many homeless people you help. It does not matter, right? It does not matter in the slightest how good you are, and it does not matter in the slightest how bad you are, right? Money, write this down. Money has no conscience. Right? Money has no conscience. That $1 million doesn't care whether you're a dealer on the side of the street selling crack cocaine to young kids as they come out of school. Right? Money has no conscience, right? And it doesn't care whether you're the preacher and you're preaching the word of God and you're the holiest man on the planet. You've never, ever done anything bad to anyone in your entire life. You do not deserve the $1 million either way, right? You got to understand this concept, right? Because most people's thinking goes like this. Oh, I've worked so hard for my boss. I've done everything everyone's ever asked of me. I've been nice to everybody. I've never hurt a flea. I've worked for 45 years. I deserve that $1 million. And yet you still won't get it because that's got nothing to do with it. Right? Just understand that life is not fair. Shit will happen. You could go bankrupt a number of times. Just because you try something once and it fails doesn't, if you give up, that's it, right? Money will go where energy flows, or money goes where attention flows. If you apply your attention or focus, whatever you want to call it, to these principles that I'm sharing in this training series, then money will flow. Money will flow, right? But the understanding of the fact that life is not fair and that bad things will happen to you, regardless of how good you've been, and that you do not deserve, and even though you think you deserve your $1 million, that doesn't necessarily mean you get it, right? Sitting on your backside doing nothing is not going to help you get $1 million, right? So understand the concept that life is not fair. However, the things that happen because life is not fair will help you get to $1 million, right? Because if you can survive the bad things that happen to you, and Melinda can give me a mountain of A4 pads about the bad things that have happened to her over her life, right? Because I've heard them all, right? I've heard everything. And she's had a whole heap of things go wrong in her life, right? But it's this concept that if she applied it, which she is now, if she applies these things to her life, it's because of the bad things, she's developed skills that have allowed her to survive. All right. It's because that life is not fair and that she didn't get things handed to her on a silver platter, that bad things happen to her throughout her life on this planet, that she has, and she's still here to talk about it, that she has developed skills that she can now apply to go from survival to being able to prosper. She can draw on those skills that she developed and you developed, because we've all gone through bad times. We've all had shit hit the wall. We've all been, I remember, right? I carry with me, and very few of you know this, right? I carry with me a $2 American note in my wallet, right? I carry this $2 note with me because there was a time in my life where that $2 note was all I had. I mean, I didn't have 2 shillings to rub together, right? I had to borrow money to eat. But it was those times, so I keep that there as a reminder that no matter how bad it gets, how unfair life is, that I now have skills that allow me to not only survive, but to prosper and to basically be able to print money on demand because of the fact that it doesn't matter if I'm good, it doesn't matter if I'm bad. I have these skills that are these principles that I'm sharing with you that allow me and now you to be able to utilize them when you utilize them and take action on them, to be able to print money on demand, right? So don't worry about the fact that life is unfair, but do acknowledge that life is not fair. That shit will happen to you. Bad things will happen to you. Even now that you're a changed person, bad stuff will still happen, right? But that's what gives you skills to be able to survive and get through those times and then apply them to be able to prosper. As I have got here, live long and prosper, as Spock would say, right? So that's the principal concept number 3 that I wanted to share with you. That's the end of today's training. And so for one final time, I'll bring on my 2 guinea pigs and see, is there anything in regards to life not being fair that you guys want? Is there questions about it? Is there anything you'd like to add in regards to life being unfair that you want to add, or things that you're not sure of? You might think that you've
It's like
wholly
the
as
saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But again, it's the application of what doesn't kill you, right? It's making sure that, because some people, they just have this feeling, they have this knowing that bad shit just happens to them all the time, right? And that's what they think is their all in life, right? Just bad stuff, right? And so that's what they focus on. And where your focus goes, that's what you have materialized in your life, right? And that's a lot of the key to what's holding people back from their first $1 million year, is that whole concept about life being unfair, bad things happening. So that's what I deserve, bad things, right? Like I said, money has no conscience. Money has zero conscience, right? It goes to the people that compress time, that understand that life is not fair, and they get those skills and apply them, right? That understand that they're looking to move through the 3 Trinity vaults that we've discussed in this particular training, right? So Melinda, is there anything that you wanted in regards to life being unfair, right? They do hypnotize themselves negatively. Absolutely. They embed it in their brain, which is, something that we've been working on with Melinda a lot. Haven't we, Melinda?
Yes, my family says I carry a little gray cloud over my head constantly.
And again, the opinions of others, right? The opinions of others can have a distinctly negative impact, right? Because imagine that. You've been told by other people whom you respect in your life that bad things happen to you, right? And if you believe that, guess what?
I do.
They do, right?
But
But now you
this is
understand.
the biggest key right now.
What's that?
If we all realize this, then we know we can move forward. We
Absolutely.
have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And you can move forward.
The understanding of the fact that life is not fair, and just because life is not fair, or the fact that you've been good or you've been bad, that money has no conscience. It will go with the skills that are used to acquire money. It'll go there, right? Regardless of how good you've been, or how bad you've been, or how how many things have happened to you along the way, right? So okay, so one last thing I want to ask of our 2 guests on this call is, what was the biggest aha moment for you? And I'll go to Melinda. I'll go to Melinda first, and then Eric second. But what was, to you, from this training, these 3 principles that I've shared, what was the biggest aha moment that you had in regards to your ability to be able to have your first $1 million year? Okay, so Melinda, your first cab off the rank.
Key number 3, life is not
What
fair.
was you?
Because of my life, it's putting it in words and admitting it and be able to move forward.
Okay, so Melinda's biggest takeaway is the fact that life is not fair, and acknowledging it, putting it
No,
into
it has no
words.
conscience.
What was that? Sorry?
And money has no conscience. It's like,
And
no matter how good I've been about things, I didn't have it. I deserved it, but I lost it. Over and
yeah.
over.
But see, there's the understanding is that no one, there's something there, right? No one deserves money. It's, you don't deserve it, right? And that's a big understanding, that people think that because they've worked hard or because they've been good, that they deserve money. And that's not the case at all, right? Money has no conscience, right? So it doesn't see your being as deserving. What it sees as deserving is the people that apply the skills to acquire money, right? The deserving aspect has no desire whatsoever. Like I said, the drug dealer on the side of the street that's selling crack cocaine to young kids coming out of school, does he deserve it? Like, is he doing things that deserve, does he deserve, is he deserving in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the universe, whatever you want to call it? Is he deserving? The answer is no. But what he is using, because money has no conscience, remember, he's using skills that have the ability to acquire money, to get it, right? He doesn't deserve it, but that money has no conscience. It goes where the skills to acquire money happen to be. Okay. And we see many, many examples of this. You can think of many examples of this. Quite often you may well have walked down the street and said, there's no way that guy or girl deserves to be that friggin' wealthy, to be that stinking rich, right? And we see celebrities all the time, right? See it all the time. And you would have thought it to yourself. But again, it's got nothing to do with whether they deserve it or not. They go, money has no conscience. Cool. So I appreciate that, Melinda. Awesome. Eric, what was your biggest takeaway from the 3 principles so far?
Same thing. Money has no conscience. It's pretty big. I mean, we have to have attractive personality, and especially the mindset. Every billionaire out there focuses so much on the mindset and is seeing the vision and pursuing the dreams. Maybe even those on the table, those dreams that cannot be reached, and they continue going forward and forward. That gives them the drive to push forward, and they become attracted to the desire, the dream, and that's what the money is, just like the bonus.
Yes, I like that. I was just going to say that they do things because to them it's not about the money, right? And that's another key concept.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fact that it's not about the money. It's it's about doing things that you enjoy doing. There's the old saying that if you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life, right? There's that
Yes.
that saying there, right? But again, it's interesting. If I was to say, like, before talking to these two about which of the 3 principles would have been the biggest aha moment for them, I would have said it would have been principle number 2, which is the time compression. But it's interesting because it wasn't. It was the fact that it was both money has no conscience, right? It was the mindset thing. Maybe it's just because these two are my clients, right? And it might be completely different to someone else, But ask yourself the same question: of these principles, which ones were the most important, and then what are you going to apply from what you've learned from these 3 principles? Okay. So as you listen to this, write down what it is that you are going to take action on, because otherwise you've just wasted an hour or so in listening to this and going, that was good. Life won't change for you. It's the ability to take action on what you learn, right? Which is another key principle that may or may not be discussed further down the track when we're in the series of these trainings in regards to unlocking the money vault and what's holding you back from that first $1 million year. So before I go, I want to thank Eric and I want to thank Melinda for being willing participants in this training, and I look forward to our next training session where we will discuss another 3 principles in regards to what's holding you back from your very first $1 million year. This is Dwayne Cunningham signing off for the team here at Conquer Your Everest, and I will talk to you again on the next episode of What's Holding You Back from Your First $1 Million Year. Bye for now. Awesome sauce. Okay, recording ended. Right. Did you guys enjoy that?
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. So that's